All right, everybody, welcome to tonight's virtual town hall, provided to you by the Alzheimer's Association in conjunction with the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice. This is your host. My name is Joshua Wagner. I am the Communication Director for the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice. We represent home care and hospice agencies throughout Ohio with advocacy, help desk, educational opportunities, and so much more. Before we get started, I'd just like to welcome everybody here and we're going to introduce people here in just a second. But before we do, this is also going to be available on our podcast. And so just for that podcast, I'd like to thank our sponsoring members, Medline, National HME, Access, Allura, and CHAP. All of those are our corporate sponsors. So again, my name is Josh Wagner. I'm the Communication Director for the Ohio Council of Home Care and Hospice. This is not my living room. This is a green screen, but someday I hope to live in a living room just like this. All of you who are here live and in person, there is a chat either beside, if you're on a computer, the window, or underneath it, and you are welcome to put your questions in there. I will do my best to get to those questions. You are also welcome to chat with each other. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to introduce a couple of people. One is the Executive Director of the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice, Joe Russell. Hi, Joe. How's it going? Oh, I can't hear you, Joe. I think maybe you muted yourself. There you go.
Excellent. I'm excellent. Can you hear me?
Joe, yeah, I can hear you fine. Joe comes to us from the Toledo area, but he relocated to Columbus several years ago. He's been the Executive Director for the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice for a little over 3 years now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, all right. So, and it's actually my anniversary today. So thanks for hiring me, Joe, a year ago. I appreciate that.
Well, I look forward to many more. So thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah. The other person I'd like to introduce is Eric Van Lyman. Did I say that correctly, Eric?
That's pretty close, Josh.
Pretty close. All right. So let's see if we can get you on the screen here. Let's see. There he is. So Eric currently serves as the regional leader for Ohio, Michigan, and West Virginia at the Alzheimer's Association, and has been with the organization over 18 years. His work with the association started as program director leading professional education, support groups, and family training for the association. Formerly a long-term care ombudsman in Indiana and a manager of independent living and adult daycare at Ohio Retirement Community, his career has focused on helping families navigate the impact of aging and dementia. Eric, it's great to have you. Joe, it's great to have you. Of course, you know I get to see you every day, which is awesome, and I get to see you virtually here as well. And so we're going to talk about several things tonight, but as sort of an opener, let's get to know each other a little bit better. And again, those of you who are in the chat are welcome to ask any questions that might come to mind. So let's throw this question out here. Why are we doing this partnership? What's the real upshot here of why the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice and the Alzheimer's Association, particularly of Central Ohio, is doing this partnership? How do you see this as being helpful to both our members and those who care for people at home with Alzheimer's and dementia? Joe, I'll let you go first since you're already on the screen.
Thanks, Josh. It's pretty clear that this has become an issue in which not only is something that the people and the families who are impacted by have to look at and be concerned with, but this is really becoming a national health issue, one in which I think we still have a lot to learn about. And why we're particularly interested in this issue is because we represent, and many of our members are the agencies that provide the care to the people who are suffering from this affliction. And if we can do a better job of teaching those folks and training those folks on the nuances of treating someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, dementia-related disease or Alzheimer's, then that's going to help everyone out. And our goal at the council is a world in which every person can receive healthcare services where it matters most, and that's at home. I have a personal experience with this issue, and it's with my grandmother. And I saw firsthand what happened when she was taken out of her home. She went downhill very significantly. So we want to learn more about this. We want to learn more about what are the types of things that we can provide better care with. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want people and their families to be able to enjoy what time they might have left in the twilight of their life.
And Eric, what about you? What are your thoughts and comments on how this partnership can help both in-home care workers, in-home caregivers, and also home care workers?
Yeah, well, we're really excited about this. So for us in Ohio, we have about 220,000 people with dementia, and 70% of them are living home. And so we know that a lot of them are getting care at home. That's, for a lot of families, that's their preference. And, part of our mission is for people with Alzheimer's and all types of dementias to really maximize the quality care and support that they can receive. So through this partnership, and learn from each other, share from each other, but most importantly, together work to serve all of these families who are going through it. And this COVID crisis has really intensified, and so we've been out looking for partnerships that will help us reach more people. Because I don't know what Joe's finding out there, but we're finding that people are starting to isolate even more and just not call, not reach out, and yet they're struggling. So we've been proactively reaching out and trying to call them, and and they're thankful, but boy, they need help. So we wanted to partner with others who could help us extend the voice to reach out and help these families. And I think the partnership and helping so many caregivers, home caregivers who are out there, anything we can do to help them grow and learn and maximize that quality care is really important.
So we're in the middle of, as we broadcast this, we're in the middle of, hopefully toward the end of this COVID-19 lockdown. I know that I've had some interesting experiences working. I kind of work from home and in the office part way, just because we work for home care and hospice, so we go in from time to time as the agency. And I'm just sort of curious, like, what are some of the new challenges that, like, this is an unprecedented thing right now. Like, we've never had this happen. Like, in the whole history of humanity, we've never been locked down like this. Even the bubonic plague, people went out and, did whatever they did. So what's the new challenges? And Eric, I'll start with you. What are the new challenges that we have in this particular moment with COVID-19, with quarantine, with shelter at home, with people and people that have dementia or Alzheimer's related issues?
Yeah, I would say the number one challenge is isolation. So, Alzheimer's and other related dementias really isolate families. So now you put them in quarantine. Their families don't want to come visit because they're afraid to get sick. They're worried about maybe having services in. They can't reach outside services, and and so they're just even more isolated. And then the ways that we've helped them through support groups and education, those are all in person. So for us, we had to quickly modify our support groups and get those all on phone. But a lot of the people who utilize our services are older. So then we had to help them work through some of the technologies. But they've been amazing and just jumped into stuff right away, doing things like this, online education that we really hadn't done as much before. And again, trying to help our folks get to it. So, but we've just watched our families get more and more isolated with this disease. The other piece out there is the families who can't get into facilities, and we know that that's been a big issue too. So, we're just out doing everything we can to let families know we're here. We have a 24/7 helpline, and so that's there for our families. So we've just had to adapt and then figure out how to go out and reach our families as they adapt to this and have to deal with it day to day.
And you mentioned the 24/7 helpline. That's actually in the crawl at the bottom of the screen, which is 800-272-3900 if they wanted to do that, or they can go to alzheimers.org. We do have Joe. What do you think here? What are some of the challenges generally to home care and hospice that we've seen? I know the answer, but not everybody else does. it's because I work in the office with you, but what are some of the challenges we've faced, and particularly, how do you think this applies to dementia patients and those with Alzheimer's?
Yeah, thanks for the question. There's obviously been, as I like to lovingly say, a boatload of problems. Given that this is an unprecedented epidemic, it makes it difficult to apply any type of experience to managing with it. We've had we've had a lot of big issues. There's three that I want to focus on today. The first one has been gaining access to patients where they live. We differentiate care that's provided in the community versus in the facility, but we also recognize that those folks that do live maybe in a nursing home or assisted living facility, that is their home. And so we do think of it like that. And we serve a lot of patients in those settings, but once this epidemic hit and the state came out and put some restrictions, that caused a lot of confusion, and it's led, quite frankly, to a lot of problems with providers getting into the facilities to be able to serve those patients. And so there are still challenges that are out there with that. What we did was immediately worked with the state government to issue a clarification that essential workforce includes those contracted providers, including home care and hospice agencies. And we are largely able to ensure that access to care wasn't going to be an issue during this pandemic. The second big thing, which I think obviously correlates with the first, is risk of exposure, both for the patient and for the provider. This has been probably our chief concern. We have not been officially included as part of the response plan from the state of Ohio, which in and of itself could spur its own conversation. But what we've focused around is ensuring that, again, we can continue to provide care and make sure that that's safe. And so we've done a lot of work, as you know, Josh, we've gotten PPE donations, we've made bulk purchase orders of PPE, and we've gotten those out to agencies because in the absence of testing, we have to take extreme precaution to make sure that we're not transmitting and contracting. Once people get this, they have to sit out on the sidelines, and that has a detrimental impact on patient care. And the third thing I would just mention is, managing the patient's needs as well as managing the government's expectations. The government has a lot of mandates that it puts on healthcare providers, all healthcare providers, and home care is no exception. But some of those regulations made it impossible to deliver care and deliver it safely. And so we worked with our federal partners, we worked with our state partners. CMS and the Trump administration worked very quickly to give some flexibility, including telehealth. And what that really allows to happen is for us to continue to provide care, continue to get the reimbursement, and get a little bit of flexibility in the regulations so that way we can manage those plans of care in a way that's good for the patient and good for the provider. So all of those things impact people with Alzheimer's and their families more significantly than other patients. And it's kind of the bona fide, the reason why is it's the bona fide nature of the disease. And so we've actually thought a lot about people with Alzheimer's when this has all come out. And, I've heard some really disheartening stories, some things that will tear at your heartstrings. It depends on where folks are in the disease process, but, not seeing your loved one for a week can mean the difference between them remembering who you are and thinking you're a stranger. And to know that the government's actions and the things that have happened because of COVID has led to this, it's really sad. So that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about this, and we're going to continue to improve this situation.
Yeah, I know that one of the things about partnering with the Alzheimer's associations, we're kind of getting everybody in the same bucket here, both in-home caregivers, family members, and also our professional agencies that are involved that are addressing those three issues that you bring up. I first of all, I'd like to say that we have people from all over the country here tonight, I saw somebody from New Jersey, from Cleveland, Xenia, out west. I've seen people from all over the place, and I'm really, really pleased that we have so many people here. There's about 78 people right now, including not including us in the room, so that's pretty cool. And I just wanted to give a couple of comments to both of you that were made. One is a person really praised Eric, the 24/7 helpline. They said it was great. Joe, to your point, someone answered the idea that, or said the idea that people are getting scared because they can't remember, who's coming into their room because it's so far and few between. And a couple of the other comments are worried about loneliness and mental health of people who have dementia. And of course, I can say personally that I've struggled at times with my mental health during this. I do pretty well, but there are moments in which, I still feel like, running outside and screaming sometimes. And I can't imagine if I was impaired somehow by cognitive disease or a mental illness or something like that, that I would do much better. I in fact would probably not do as well. So some of the I'm wondering if you guys can answer some of those comments specifically. And Eric, I'll look at you for this, specifically about some mental health issues and depression issues and loneliness issues and caregiver and sort of one person talked about being scared, their person being scared when the unknown person walks in. I wonder if you can speak to that at all, Eric.
Sure. So, one of the things over my years of working with people with dementia, one of the things I've always shared with families and staff is that connection is the most important thing that you can do for someone with dementia. So you can imagine this COVID crisis right now is doing the exact opposite of that. And so what you find is that people function at a certain level with dementia. But if you take out the connection, the support, the structure, what happens is they begin to go down. On Saturday, I'm going to do a program on stages, and we're going to talk about how you can maximize somebody to the highest level possible. But I when I used to work out in the field, I would see people who are isolated, alone, and the first thing we would do is work with the family to get them support and service. And so that is essential. And as Joe was talking earlier, with all trying to make sure they're in, home care is such an essential piece of the care system for people with Alzheimer's. And so many families want to be at home. They want to stay there if they can. And so, having access to that. But on the mental health part of it, I'm going to touch on that both for the person with dementia and the caregiver. We're hearing from caregivers that they're seeing loved ones decline even over time. And so, what that does is that makes their behaviors maybe get worse, hallucinations. If they don't know who's coming in, if it's a family member or, even a trusted service professional, they might not take help from them. And that becomes more difficult. And so, making sure that there's some connection is essential. But the other piece is, we have in Ohio over 600,000 caregivers, and that we estimate about 3 caregivers to every one person who's somehow involved. And what we're finding is they feel isolated, they feel depressed. They're dealing with behaviors they're not getting as much help in. And so that's why we've got to work together to make sure that we get as much service to these families, because it's like a lifeline. They depend on it. We can support through the helpline, we educate them, and we can do support groups, but they need that lifeline. That's really important to keep their mental health and really their highest level of functioning possible.
Yeah, I totally agree and understand. The mental health, not only of the patients, but also of the caregivers themselves, is a really great point. And
Yeah.
and I know that we have some awesome members of our association that are just resilient people who, go above. Joe, I wonder if you could speak to some of that, some of the things that you've seen from, or maybe heard from some of our members in the member agencies and nurses and staff in the field, like, what that they are going above and beyond despite their own probably mental health struggles for what they're dealing with. I don't know if you've heard any stories, but I imagine we can speak generally about sort of the resiliency of our members in home care and hospice that are on the front lines.
What's really encouraging is to see these agencies and to see these frontline nurses and STNAs and aides just band together. And, and really continue to provide care at the risk of their own health, and not having necessarily the PPE they need to go into someone's home, someone whom they might know is at a risk of getting from them. They have not vanquished their responsibilities, they double down on them. And these are stories that are going to be told for a long, long time. And I hope that once the dust all settles, that we can get more of the intricate details, because they're profound. I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of national publications recently to tell these stories. And one story that here in Ohio that really struck me was a gentleman who was a nurse in the field. He contracted COVID-19 from a patient who was COVID-19 positive, even though he had enhanced PPE to protect himself. He got extremely sick. He almost died. And as soon as he was better, he went back out into the field. And that tells you, it's sort of like a soldier during wartime when they come back from a tour of duty and all they want to do is go back. It's been the same thing. It's been absolutely remarkable. And then other things, Trey Addison of the association, when I was on a call with him in the aging director a couple of weeks ago, and he told a great story that I think is worth sharing here, and that's around folks with that are suffering from Alzheimer's who were really afraid from their providers because their providers were coming in with all this enhanced PPE and face masks. And the providers have recognized those types of nuances, and they're starting to make adjustments to specifically make those patients more comfortable. Look, you could continue to wear your PPE selfishly and say, I don't want to get sick, or say, I don't know if I'm sick and I don't want to get this person sick. But to remove the very materials that are protecting you from the unknown, specifically to better serve your patient, I think is something that we ought not to forget for a long time. And I quickly wanted to mention the mental health thing. I know, Josh, you and I and the other folks here on the council's team have talked a lot about this. And I think it's affected people in different ways. Even folks here on the team, we went nonstop for about the first 3 weeks, and then we all looked at each other one day, and it's just the wind came out of the sails. What we've seen from our agencies is the same type of long-term detrimental impact to the mental health, and it's not the same type of mental health that we see necessarily on the day-to-day basis. It's that feeling that where you start to question whether or not your actions are making a difference. And when you're willing to, for example, run into a burning fire to save someone's life, you're not exactly thinking about those types of things. But if you run into a burning fire and save someone and come out of that and they pass away, you have a tendency to ask the questions of, did this help or not? And we're getting our second wind, and we're kind of piecing ourselves together. But I suspect that mental health is going to be a big issue for our community for quite a while, even after this is done.
Absolutely, Joe. And in fact, I'm getting some comments from the chat as well that sort of reflect this. And there's two kind of comments that stuck out. There's a lot of chat going on, and so I'm trying to pick out things. Colleen a little earlier mentioned something along the lines of her father's been in lockdown for 8 weeks, and she's trying to encourage the facility that he's in. He's in a facility to sort of have group activities. There's no cases in his particular unit, so they're encouraging that. And we have another person here that made the comment, Janice, that said she's caring for her mom by herself. She doesn't have a medical background, and she's learning on her own, and she feels isolated as well. Eric, I'm wondering if you can speak to some of this, like someone like Janice here, who is kind of learning the ropes right now by herself, is feeling the mental strain, and I think that's probably why we have so many people in attendance tonight. Is probably, there's absolutely challenges to attending to someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, but really, if they're not in good shape, they can't give good care to the people that they're giving care for. So I'm wondering if there's any ideas that you've come across, any creative ideas like Colleen had and is encouraging her facility to do for her father's mental health and for hers, no doubt, that can help the caregiver find a little bit of resilience in this area as someone like Janice might be learning the ropes. I wonder if you could speak to that, Eric.
Sure. So, one thing I want to say about caregivers, the number two reason, behaviors is number one, but the second leading reason that people are placed in facilities is because of the health of the caregiver. And so, if somebody wants to keep someone at home, taking care of themselves is really essential to that. In terms of what do you do with them, I had actually a friend from church call, and she was going, and her mom had dementia, and she had fallen and broken her arm. So now they were going to be working to bring her home. And she's like, what do we do? So we used to teach, and I used to travel around the state and actually the region, teaching what we called activity-based Alzheimer's care. So we actually taught families and caregivers in facilities and home care how to build a schedule for somebody each day, and kind of an underlying schedule. And some things could be physical, some could be just cognitive stimulation. And so we've shared that some out there, and found that helpful. We have so then we have like a list of 50 things that can be done with someone at home. And so if you take that structure and you put that together with just a lot of different ideas, we can help caregivers put together really a great plan to keep them. And then they just have to figure out how to keep themselves juiced up, because it's tired. And that's where home service usually comes in, is to be able to kind of lift up that caregiving system to be able to do it. And so, a lot of times on the helpline, what we're actually helping families do is think about what to do during the day. And some of these people are not used to it. Maybe they're furloughed and at home, and they figure, oh, we'll help, mom, and all of a sudden they're an Alzheimer's caregiver and they'd never done it before. And so our 24/7 helpline is, I appreciate the compliment that we got. We have amazing staff. Some of them are here in Ohio on the nights and weekends. We get answered in Chicago, but they are amazing people, and that's what they're there for. Is to give them information and help people know what to do, how to navigate this, and as well as just support. I've told some caregivers, just call us, because we're here to help that caregiver line in. But whatever you can do in terms of helping people engage and interact, that's the number one treatment over anything, drugs or any sort of treatment. The number one treatment for dementia is an interactive, connected situation with structure to it. That's not too much that overdoes them, but not so little that they will go backwards. So, Joe, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's essential, giving breaks to the caregivers, giving them systems to care. We can do that, and then getting help in there when they need.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, and that's great advice. I think one of the things that always sticks out to me, and when we're looking at this from the caregivers or the provider's perspective, is it's really important, especially during these times where you're not just providing care for a certain amount of time, but in a lot of these cases, like mentioned, it's all day and long periods of time, is never forgetting the fact that of who they are and what's going on. I think the biggest thing that helps a lot of providers is just to remember to have some patience. It's very interesting because a lot of folks who are suffering from Alzheimer's tend to look typical, meaning they don't look sick, they don't have any type of physical ailments necessarily. And so when you're able to carry on a conversation with someone and it seems to be normal, you can get to a point where you think, oh, well, maybe this is not so bad. And then there's always that one thing that reminds you that, oh, man, that's not right. But it can be very difficult for example, if someone you're taking care of lashes out at you, and you might think that they're just being mean, but in reality, their behavior is a result of things like confusion or even fear. So it's really, really critical that as we take care of folks, especially during this time where we tend to be cooped up, that we remember that a lot of the things that they may say or do are not a reflection of you. And again, it goes back to that mental health piece of it can be very disheartening for you to be spending all your time taking care of someone to have a feeling like they don't appreciate it. Well, it's probably not that at all. And if a little bit of patience can really go a long way, and that's one thing that we've been really focused on sharing with our providers throughout this pandemic.
Josh, if I can jump in, one of the things that when we teach, we talk about look for feelings, not facts. Sometimes, particularly in the afternoon, I'm sure Joe can talk about that, hearing stories, but in the afternoon, people with dementia get worn out. So they're even, the dementia almost seems worse all of a sudden. It's called sundowning. And they can start asking a lot more questions. And when I used to run the adult daycare, it was witching hour at 3:00 because everybody's up, they're ready to go. They didn't know what they wanted, but they just started wandering, and we had to help them. And what we try to do is look for the feeling, what's going on inside of them, not the facts. So we had somebody who was trying to, they're right now kind of quarantined, so they might be wanting to get out, saying, I want to go home, even though they're sitting in the house they've been in for 40 years. And that's pretty frustrating, right? Whether you're a caregiver or a professional caregiver, it wears you out personally. And so, being able to learn how to connect with them, and look for that feeling, what they're looking for is safety and connection. They're not looking for home. And so, education is so important, both for the staff going in and for our caregivers. And, that's why we continue to push education like tonight and other things. We have online education across the state, all sorts of different things to help people figure out how to deal with this stuff, because it's really taxing. It's wearing in normal times, and I think you put all this COVID pressure and isolation, it's even worse.
I'd just like to give some feedback from the just some general feedback from the chat, and that is one of the things that I mentioned Janice earlier, that they have been talking to Janice about your caregiver support groups. That's one of the things that the people in the chat who probably have a lot of experience with that all over Ohio is suggesting to Janice and other people that they join some of your caregiver support groups. I'm wondering if you could speak to that at all.
Sure. So we have about 140 support groups across Ohio. Of course, right now they're meeting virtually. And as I mentioned, I think earlier, some of them have gone from every other week to weekly, or they've increased frequency. So if people are interested, if they just call the 800 number, we can get them connected to a local group that hopefully someday, when we're ever released from quarantine like we are, that they can get back to. But I think that support, I always say if you're sending a troop somewhere and it's 50 people, if you don't send the kitchen, they'll never be able to fight. And so many times caregivers think that they don't need the support, they can just do the fight, but they'll wear out. And so we really believe in the value. I led the support groups at our chapter for 10 years, and we have some of the best support group leaders. A lot of them have gone through it. They want to help other families go through it. Some people are worried that it's just complaining sessions, but I've seen laughter, tears, great ideas, and camaraderie. And sometimes these people come families. So those are there for all the caregivers. Again, right now you can access them, via phone, and whatever we can do to help people connect to that, we'd love to do, because I absolutely believe in the power of a support group to help our caregivers.
So when we're talking about support, Joe, I'd like to sort of throw you a question here. When we're talking about supporting in-home family members like we just talked about, the Alzheimer's Association has these caregiver groups. How can home care agencies be a support to in-home caregivers? What's one of the ways that maybe in-home caregivers could find some relief and some support from some of our agencies that we represent?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think it is definitely something that is needed. And as Eric pointed out, I mean, managing the stress is actually a big portion of being a healthcare provider in general. In a former life, I was actually an EMT, and I remember going through my training, and a big part of that training was how do you manage stress? You know, how do you, when you see something horrible, how do you manage that? And the one thing they said don't do is don't internalize it, meaning don't just act like it didn't happen, move forward. So I think one of the things that can happen is folks can get together to tell their stories. And there's a tendency for when healthcare providers start to tell stories, just like veterans, that they start to see that, you know, maybe my story is, I mean, other people have had the same experience, and I'm not alone in this. And then they can start providing best practices. You know, hey, my family member or the person I was taking care of was doing this. They were acting out every time I would turn on the TV, and I couldn't figure out why. And with a little bit of discussion with the family and a little bit of working through it, what we realized is that they didn't want to watch TV because they thought they had seen everything there was on TV and stuff of that nature. So I think communication is always a really good way to work through physiological and psychological stress. And I think that's what the support groups can provide, is that outlet to go talk to people about these issues in a way that are with folks who can uniquely understand them. And there's no other format to address that. And I think it's equally true for family members and for providers. And I would love to see a format where family members and providers can kind of come together to have those conversations.
We got a comment that sort of dovetails what you were just saying, Joe, in the chat, that their home care agency, I'm not sure who made the comment, that their home care agency actually here in Ohio provides a support group. It's one of the services that their home care agency does, is in addition to what the Alzheimer's Association provides, their home care association also provides a support group, which I think is another great thing, that, you know, you can get that skilled care in your home. I think that personally staying home is far better. I know that I have my house, and I love staying home, and I wouldn't want to go anywhere else if I was sick. You know, there's places to go that are obviously great care, but you know, there's just nothing like staying at home, and that's one of the things that I think that home care and hospice, if someone's toward the end, you know, of their life, that can really allow them to be in the comfort and safety of their own home. Even, you know, Eric mentioned earlier that sometimes people get confused with dementia and Alzheimer's, that they want to go home even though they are. And that just shows you the depth at which it's important for people to feel comfortable and connected to where they felt comfortable and connected for many years. I wonder if you could speak to some of that as well. Yeah,
well, Josh, if I had a home that looked like yours, I wouldn't leave either.
Joe, you've never been to my house, as far as I know. I live in a corrugated box on the east side of town. So
I've seen the drone footage, and I'm looking forward to utilizing your pool this summer.
All right. Good.
Just to forewarn you, though, I have a mean cannonball.
Yeah, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, we have. I didn't mention that, but we have a lot of programs who that have created these type of provider like support groups on their own accord for a variety of different reasons. Either they saw that there was a gap, or maybe there's a substantial number of people on their caseloads that are suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia-related disease, and so they're starting to create these ancillary programs to provide support. And the idea, all stems around the individual and providing better care. So if you're a family and you're looking for a potential caregiver, finding those programs that have those one-off options such as support groups is a good indication that that agency cares about serving this particular population. I've actually been working with Trey and the association on, you guys have been leading the effort, and we've been looking at how do we provide better standards of care and better training, official training for those providers. And what we have found is that there, in the state of Ohio, there is no state plan for care for people with Alzheimer's. That is to say that a program might be able to say that they're specialized in this area, but there isn't an official designation for that. And so, but there's a lot of great programs that are specific to people with Alzheimer's. So those and then of course they're not necessarily operational now, which Eric could probably speak more to, is the growth of the cafes that are out there. And this is sort of the same type of thing where they're able to come together and get resources. And just to give you an example of the type of value that this provides is, I'm a big car guy. I love cars. I have a lot of car projects, and I am not a professional mechanic, and so I have to go somewhere to learn this stuff, right? And so I have joined different communities where I can connect with people to learn more about those specific things that are unique to my situation, and that's kind of the same thing. But at the end of the day, it's for our agencies and the providers, what they care about is providing high quality care, and that's what these programs are aimed at doing.
Thanks for that, Joe. And so sort of along that vein of supporting caregivers, Eric, I'd like to ask you a question. We got this question earlier today on the chat, or on the email submission, and it's a person who gave up their job to care for their Alzheimer's patient, their mother, to care for their mother who has Alzheimer's, and they are surviving on her limited income. And this person was wondering if there was any financial assistance available, so far as grants or loans or any other sort of financial support that might be available for someone who has found themselves in that situation.
Yeah, so we can sit down and do care consultations with families and try to help them connect to services. You know, each situation is really different. So, you know, what I would say, always the area agency on aging. There's 12 of them here in Ohio, and that is always a go-to resource for things like that. They can help families connect and understand what resources. What's interesting in Ohio is we have this situation where some counties have funded senior services, some haven't. I know, you know, in terms of the situation where people are actually at home living and caring for their loved one and they're not able to work, some states, Ohio's one of them, but some states actually fund families to stay home and care for them, because in the long run it ends up becoming cheaper than a long-term care in a facility. And so, you know, there's different solutions. Ohio's got a pretty robust program of services of respite to go in through, you know, Passport, which is like a Medicaid for in-home. That's a wonderful service. Like I said, a lot of the communities, different counties have senior levy funding. But I don't know if there's anything that really addresses for someone living at home. We know that a lot of people, because of Alzheimer's, have given up jobs, they've given up promotions, they've given up a lot to be able to stay home and keep that loved one. And, you know, Joe might be able to tell you this, but, you know, when I worked at the adult daycare and the retirement community, I was so impressed by some of these caregivers we met. I mean, they were saints. I mean, they gave up a lot, did a lot. And, but, you know, just reach out to either local area agency on aging, reach out to our 800 number. We'll try to get you connected. And then, you know, one of the big works that we've done, Joe's referred to Trey a few times. Trey is our public policy director here in Ohio. And this guy loves to be the voice for our families and really get out there and pound the pavement and say, hey, here's what's needed. And one of the things we just were able to do is pass a piece of legislation that starts the first Alzheimer's state plan in Ohio. So one piece of information always shocks people is 49 states in America all had state Alzheimer's plans, and the only one that didn't was Ohio. People ask why. Well, I don't know, but you know, ours will be the best because now we can learn from everybody else. So the director of aging will be leading that and working with the director of health. That was all supposed to start, and then kind of COVID hit. But when people voice stories like that, those are the things that our legislature needs to hear. That people understand, that our decision makers understand what families are going through. This is a 24/7 disease. It is relentless. It wears down caregivers and families, and wears down professional caregivers even. And so we're here to support and do that, but we also want to advance public policy that will drive the best. So this state plan, we will be working, hopefully be, a part of that to help push and voice for our caregivers. So I appreciate her sharing that, because those are the kind of things that we can voice and try to work together as a state, both in the private sector as well as in the public sector, what we can do to improve care for Ohioans. So again, 220,000 people with this disease. That's going to grow in the next 20, 30 years to another 30,000, to almost 250,000. That's another 750,000 caregivers. It's 1 million people in Ohio that are either have the disease or that are caring for someone directly. And we're a 12 million person state. This is a big deal, and so this situation's growing.
I'm wondering if I can ask another question from the Thank you for your response, Joe. Do you have anything to respond to that? Any sort of idea? That's really not our purview necessarily, looking for grants for individual families, but I know that Eric mentioned Passport, which is something that we have, is something I hear tossed around the office quite a bit, even though, frankly, I don't understand what it is, because I haven't learned that quite yet. But I don't know if you had any comments to that effect as well.
Not really. Eric gave the perfect answer. It was a perfect answer. Yeah. I would just say that we have been engaged in the same conversations, and the Alzheimer's Association's efforts to lead the way to ensure that there is an Ohio state plan has gotten quite a bit of traction. And as Eric mentioned, we had things moving along until COVID hit. So it's not an effort that's going to be abandoned, and we're going to throw our weight behind it. I've actually, as part of the legislation that was passed to create a study group, I've been a person being considered to be part of that group. So I look forward to potentially participating if I'm so selected to do so. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but there's a lot of great people in the state of Ohio that are doing it. So we're going to keep plowing forward.
It's interesting, Joe, as you're mentioning that people in the chat are actually saying things like write your representative and talk to them. Yep. And that's something that we do at the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice. Is we're an advocacy group, so we do talk to representatives, but it's not just us that can do the talking. We need people to contact their legislators and have this plan for people that need dementia care, because it's really important. And I actually got an interesting question again in the email earlier today. It's kind of related to what you were just talking about. Is there a protocol to assure families will have time with their loved ones when they're actively dying? And of course, that's kind of a hospice question, but I'll let either Joe or Eric address that. Is there a protocol to assure families will have time with their loved ones who are toward the end?
This is what we call a sticky wicket, and it is that because the real answer is no, at least not that I'm aware of. We've got a lot of stories through this pandemic in which families were denied access to their loved ones in a facility and they died. Not died because of that, but they were in that process already. And my heart goes out to those families. I can't even imagine what it must be like to not have been able to say goodbye. And not only that, but to wonder if saying goodbye would have even mattered. It pulls at your heartstrings, but it's those types of stories that remind us of why this work is so important. One of the things that always strikes me when you talk to caretakers and those who are specifically with Alzheimer's or dementia-related diseases, you watch that person against their will sort of begin to decline. And it happens at different stages at different speeds. But there's always this one moment that reminds you of why you're there and what you're doing. And that moment is when, you know, you start to lose hope that that person is still able to comprehend and a lot of things, but most important, comprehend the relationship that you might have with that person. You know, in my experience, one of the things that my mother really hurts her even to this day was the fact that towards the end, she forgot who she was and everything that she had done for her. And that could be really debilitating, but there's always this one point, it happens to most people, where once you think that that person is gone, that they're there. They come back. There's this twinkle in their eye. There's this spark. And I actually saw it with my grandmother with a lot of music. We would put on Louis Armstrong, and she would just light up. And, oh, okay, there she is. And it's that moment when it all comes back and it reminds you. And it's those types of things that allow us to move forward and have faith that what we're doing is important. And so I think it's really critical that we don't forget those types of stories. And I think it's really critical that we look for that twinkle, that we look for that opportunity to provide that spark and provide that person with a little bit of dignity and support in their most vulnerable time in their life.
Eric, do you have anything to add to that particular sentiment?
And I remember years ago when I was at the adult daycare, one of the things I did is I would play the piano in the morning, and as the residents would come in, they'd sit around and circle. And we had this woman who actually couldn't talk. She would mumble. She was, far along in the disease. We really never communicated with her. I really never heard her voice other than a mumbling. And so I was playing an old hymn, actually, and as I was playing it, I hear this opera voice going on behind me, and I'm like, what is that? I thought it was an angel or something. I turn around, and it was her singing every word to this hymn. We had never heard her actually speak a word. And right there and then I realized that, I talked earlier about connection. With connection, we have a chance to connect to their spirit, because with Alzheimer's, that person's always there. Their just ability to get out is changed. And our work at the association help families build and make those connections and support them. And I'm sure Joe and all of the affiliates there, their work is to have the best staff possible to create those connections when they're there. And together, that's what we're trying to do, is help people maximize someone's life with Alzheimer's. It's tough. It's a difficult disease. We've watched so many people die with this. There's no cure or anything. And so we fight against that as well as an association. But really, in partnerships like this, we can work together to improve quality of care for all these people in Ohio affected and for their caregivers. And it's our heartbeat. I'm sure it's your guys' heartbeat as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's so many great things that we just have a few minutes left, and I just want to say thank you to both of you guys. We have a couple more things that I'll ask you, but before we do, I just want to say thank you to both Joe and Eric for your time tonight, and there's been a lot of great chat. There's some things that we didn't get to tonight in the chat, and a couple of things we didn't get to in terms of the email questions, only because your guys' answers were also really good. There'll be emails that are going to go out after this. For those of you who would like to watch the replay will be up for 3 days, and you'll be able to click on that in your emails if you want to watch any part of this again. And you'll be able to send any chats. I can't guarantee that the chats after this will get read necessarily, but you can also email us at ochch at ochch.org, or go to the Alzheimer's Association, which is on the crawl at the bottom of your screen right there right now. Just a couple questions, and then I'd just like to put up a slide for some resources for Alzheimer's caregivers and their patients and the people that they care for. Just a really quick question: do you guys know that if people in nursing homes, this is one of the questions I got in the email today, qualify for stimulus checks? Does anybody know that answer? That was just one of the questions we got.
I don't know that answer because we don't represent nursing homes, but I don't think probably they do. I do know that I'm not a tax expert either, but I think that the stimulus checks were tied to tax filings, not necessarily where somebody lived. So I think if you've recently gone into a nursing home, but you filed a tax return in 2019 or 2018, I think you probably could. And your marital status obviously impacts that, and your income. So all those factors matter. I'm sure there are resources available via CMS. There's probably a consumer hotline that's a really great question, though.
Yeah, it just was one that stood out to me in the emails from today. Eric, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I'm not aware of that.
All right, so I'm going to throw up a couple of slides. And we will make these slides available. These are virtual caregiver resources. This is through the Alzheimer's Association. Again, we'll make sure that you guys get a copy of this, or you can watch the replay and pause the screen if you'd like. That's another way to do it. If you want to watch this, just zoom to the end. We're about 57 minutes in here. And you have an upcoming thing here. You have an upcoming event here, Eric, a Q&A webinar with Dr. Adele Aziz. I wonder if you can say anything to that, May 21st at 11 a.m., and that's another webinar?
Like this with webinar, it's information for our families who are struggling, and to ask any question they need of not just an Alzheimer's expert, but a behavioral neurologist, somebody who's going to help them think through some of these difficulties that are coming up due to the isolation and being at home. So again, we have a lot of trainings across the state. We just picked one to kind of share and engage. But if you go to alz.org and then you put in your zip code, you'll find trainings all over. And we have lots of online training just about the disease, caregiving, behaviors, communication. Like I said, I'm doing one on Facebook on Saturday, just on stages, because families are always interested in what stage, and how do you care for people. So there's lots of information out there. Big thing I do is just encourage people, reach out. And if you want to keep a loved one at home as long as possible, the best thing you can do is take care of yourself as a caregiver.
And find the resources and support that you need. I actually got an answer to the stimulus check question. The answer is yes. Somebody in the chat said that their parent had not filed taxes for years, and they still got a stimulus check. So there's the answer to our question about that. So I just got mine like 2 days ago. So I'll be at GameStop for the next week if you need me, Joe. So anyway, that's mostly a joke. I already have a Nintendo. I just like to again thank you guys. Before we go, I'm going to put a poll up for people to ask what you thought of tonight's town hall meeting. That should have just popped up, and you're welcome to take that poll. You have 3 options. You loved it, you were neutral about it, or it needed something more. And I'm seeing the results coming in from people, and that's really great. And I appreciate the feedback, so we know what we're doing.
Josh, if I can just mention, I think this has been a great town hall for no other reason than my head's never been shinier.
That's right. It's good. I said you needed more light, and there you go. That's what happened. Is you provided the light yourself. You're literally radiant, Joe. And of course, if you need us, your home care or home care agency or hospice agency, or represent one, of course, you're probably here because you got all the email blasts and social media that I've been sending about this for the last week. But of course, we are representing you. We are here with you. We are a resource for you, and anything that we can do to help, we will. Eric, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off here?
We're available 24/7 on the 1-800 number that you've seen scrolling. Reach out and we will connect you. We'll do a one-on-one care consultation, or we'll get you connected to just whatever service you're looking for, and just reach out for help, and we'll be glad to help you.
Joe, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, first I just wanted to thank Eric. Thank you for participating here today. I want to thank the association for partnering with us to put this together. Josh, you are a titan among titans. Thanks for the heavy lifting to get this all together. I just wanted to thank all of the people out there, the the nurses and the aides that are quite literally risking their lives to provide care. I want to thank all the family members who are spending their time with their loved ones. And, you know, we're going to get through this. There's no doubt about it. I think we're going to learn a lot of lessons. And one of the resources that we have available is through a sister organization of ours called the Center for Community-Based Care. It can be reached at our website, ochch.org. Under the Community Outreach tab, it's the Center for Community-Based Care. There's a lot of resources for advanced care planning and dealing with problems and finding services. But the thing that I think would be most useful is our provider search tool, where depending on where you live, you can look for members of the association who are providing care in that area. And so thank you again for all this. And thank you all for everyone who took the time tonight to attend this. This is such an important topic, and we're going to keep talking about it because we want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
before we sign off, I just like to mention that Trey, who you guys have both mentioned throughout this entire thing, who I believe is the executive director of Central Ohio, is that correct? Has actually been with us the entire time. He's just been in the chat. So I just like to give a shout out to Trey Addison.
You've been talking bad about him the whole time.
Yeah, we were talking good about you, Trey. So that's good. So just like to give a shout out to him while we're still online, and thank him for his attendance, and Ginger, who's another associate of his at the Alzheimer Association of Central Ohio. Just like to give a shout out to them who put this together with me, as well as Joe and Eric. And it's been great to have you again. You're very welcome to look us up at OCHCH staff on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn, as well as the Alzheimer's Association, which I know is on Facebook and Twitter. I don't know if you're on LinkedIn or not, but I'm sure that you're such a big organization. You're still probably on MySpace. So, you're probably everywhere.
On that.
All right, everybody. Thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you for the polls, and you're welcome to watch the replay. Will be up until Friday night at midnight, and you'll get emails to that effect. And I just want to say thank you all for coming. Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.